My name is Dahlia Monroe. I am 36 years old and Army intelligence linguist, who works in the quiet between words. In the field, a handful of people knew me by a call sign, Asira. I do not chase applause. I read rooms, read faces, read danger before it speaks. That is my work even when the uniform is black tie. Tonight the room gleamed like polished brass. A military gala flags rising along the walls, medals flashing under chandeliers, the low shuffle of dress shoes on marble. Servers threaded through clusters of officers and contractors, a river of crystal and small talk. I took the far chair at my sister's table and set my clutch beside the plate, the way I always prefer, back to a pillar eyes on the exits. My brother-in-law Ethan Cross loved spotlight more than oxygen. He wore it like cologne. He had a talent for making himself taller by shrinking someone else. This time, that someone was me. He rose with a grin, lifted his flute, and did the thing he always does, call for attention, with a laugh that sounds like silverware striking glass. "Family," he said, "let me introduce my sister-in-law, the soldier in the family who never fires a shot." A beat, then the smirk. Our very own translator. Useful at parties, I guess. In the real stuff, a useless soldier. The room chuckled because the room didn't know me. The sound pressed on my chest like a steady hand. I kept my face even the way I was trained. Humiliation has a weight, but it is not heavier than silence. I breathed in the lemony sting of polish and champagne and counted 3 heartbeats. My sister stared at her napkin. Ethan enjoyed the pause. He always enjoyed the pause. I could have answered. I could have told them about the convoy that got through a checkpoint because I copied a border guard's accent, or about the night an extraction hinged on hearing one wrong syllable. But you do not argue with people who need you small. You choose where to spend oxygen. Mine is for survival. From the stage, a string quartet curled a melody around the tables. Across the floor, a 4-star posed with a defense contractor, while a photographer snapped and beckoned. Inside my head, a different music played, the faint wires of attention, the pattern of glances, the places where laughter arrived a breath too late. When you spend your life listening for what isn't said, you stop fearing the volley of what is. Ethan leaned close as he sat, voice a whisper, dressed as a joke. "Don't pout, Dahlia. Smile for the nice people." His smile asked the room to join in. Many did. That is another talent of his recruiting spectators. I lifted my water glass and watched the room through its thin oval. The distortion made power look honest, broadened shoulders, narrower eyes. A commander I recognized by reputation entered from the terrace, Commander Ryan Hale, U.S. Navy SEALs, the calm at the center of a storm. The buzz shifted as people noticed him. Beside him drifted a logistics general with a face like polished stone, the same man Ethan bragged about serving. Hale shook hands and listened more than he spoke. The quartet paused. Cutlery chimed. I set down my glass and let the air lay flat in my lungs. Impressions are a map. They tell you where the ground might give way. Ethan raised his flute again, fishing for one last laugh. I looked at him and thought, not for the first time, noise is a mask. And some masks are made of glass. I felt the old reflex settle in catalog, prioritize, discard. 2 stairwells, 3 exits, 1 terrace with a service gate. A habit that keeps you safe and makes you strange at parties. My sister's fingers worried the napkin. Ethan's boss smiled without teeth. The junior officers laughed too hard, auditioning for favor. My grandmother used to say silence can weigh more than protest. I carry that line like a coin I keep warm in my palm. I let the joke sit where it fell. The night had other work for me. A server passed with a tray of flutes. The chandelier breathed light over a sea of ribbons and brass, and for a moment I wished to be what they thought I was: ordinary, harmless, forgettable. But overlooked is not the same as unseen. Across the room, a commander I knew by reputation, Ryan Hale, U.S. Navy SEALs, stepped in from the terrace beside the logistics general Ethan bragged about serving. The quartet paused. Cutlery chimed. I set down my glass and listened for measures no one else heard. I saw it because I was watching what no one else watched: the unimportant corner, the simple task done twice. A server in a crisp jacket reached for a champagne flute, hesitated, then glanced at the logistics general's aide. The nod looked like a blink. Something small flashed in the server's palm. His wrist tipped over the flute meant for Commander Ryan Hale. A clear droplet slid and vanished. I rose as if pulled by wire. The floor was soundless, the quartet's melody bent around pillars. Hale lifted the flute, still listening to a note about training rotations. I reached his shoulder, breath steady. In German, pitched low, I said, "Nick trinken," as if forgift it. "Don't drink, it's poisoned." He didn't turn, he didn't need to. The flute hovered, then stopped. His eyes slid toward mine, just enough to place my face. Something changed. A door opened without sound. "Asira," he murmured, also in German, shaping the syllables as if confirming a password he'd never thought to speak in a ballroom. My pulse counted once. "Yes," I said, still in the language that belonged to our quiet wars. "Set it down." He did. "No drama." He set the glass back on the tray. The server's fingers tightened. Hale nodded once acknowledgement and turned with the warmth of a host. "General," he said lightly, a word. He stepped into the server's path, intercepting the tray. He touched another flute, inspected it with a smile that did not reach his eyes, and set it down. The aide started to move. I shook my head once. He froze. Over his shoulder, Ethan watched with the half-grin he wore when he believed the world would flatter him. I watched the grin drain, calm and counting. "Gentlemen," Hale said softly, "I'm going to ask you to stand very still." Then, without looking away from the server, he lifted his chin toward the logistics general, the man Ethan bragged about serving, and pointed an economical line drawn through air. "Arrest him." It was not loud. 2 naval security personnel who had been admiring the view stepped in. The server tried to back away. The aide grabbed his sleeve and let go, palms up. The general's face stayed polished stone until the cuffs touched his wrists. Then it cracked with fury. The room searched for a story it could breathe. Someone laughed too brightly. Someone else said there must be a mistake. Cameras hesitated, then glowed. I stood and let the tide break around me. Ethan looked at me, then at Hale, then at his boss, turned toward the terrace doors. He shaped his mouth for a joke that never came. His smirk thinned into confusion. Then fear, then the recognition that the ladder he'd been climbing was a snake. "Dahlia," he said, voice dry. "What did you?" "Nothing," I answered. I watched. Hale lifted the suspect flute and handed it to a security officer with a sealed pouch. "Chain of custody," he said, warmth gone, procedure remaining. He faced me, choosing privacy in a public moment. He did not thank me. He said in that careful German, "You still hear the quiet." "Asira, I do," I said. "And I still keep it." Across the room, my sister rose halfway and sat. The quartet attempted a measure and abandoned it. The chandelier seemed to brighten, though it was only our eyes widening to take in what had been there, the twitch, the swapped lanyards, the blink, that was a nod. For a heartbeat, the ballroom refused to believe what it had seen. Then sound returned in fragments, heels scuffing a cough, the quartet dropping their bows. The aide tried a different tack, pointing toward the kitchen. "We should secure the catering staff," he suggested, voice smooth as satin. Hale didn't look at him. "We'll secure everyone," he said, and the officer with the pouch was moving, sealing the flute. As if it were a live fuse. Ethan finally found words. "Commander," I can vouch for, his voice broke on the last syllable. He had meant to say loyalty. It arrived as panic. He looked to his boss for rescue and met handcuffs instead. When his eyes came back to me, there was a plea there I had never seen directed at me, not for friendship, not for mercy, just for the world to be what he thought it was 5 minutes ago. It wasn't. I kept my hands by my sides. "Watch your step," I said quietly. The floor shifts when the truth arrives. Ethan's smile did not fall all at once. It unwound thread by thread as if some invisible seam ripper had been set against him. By the time the terrace doors closed on his boss and the officers, the grin had become an outline, searching for a face to live on. He glanced at me again, confused that I was still the same size I had been 10 minutes ago, even as his world shrank around him. I let the quiet return to my lungs. The chandelier steadied. Conversations restarted in cautious half-sentences. Somewhere a camera shutter found courage and clicked. In my head, I measured the night the way I measure every mission, before and after. Before, I was a punchline in a nice dress. After, I was exactly what I had always been, whether anyone clapped for it or not, a woman who listens for danger and names it in time. Not a hero, not a ghost. Just the voice that says stop before someone swallows the wrong story. Tonight it wasn't only a glass that was turned aside. It was a life, maybe several, And like it or not, mine too. Fade to black. Then start the clock. The chandelier's glow from the gala still hummed behind my eyes as another room replaced it. Diesel wet stone winter. Memory has a switch. Mine flips when danger brushes past. The last time a hand hovered near poison, the night had no moon and Germany's cold bit through fabric. We had shadowed a convoy to a border crossing that did not officially exist, a gravel cut between scaffolds and floodlights that never turned on. My team waited in the timberline boots in slush. I crouched behind a rotted stump with a handset to my ear and listened to men who did not know they were already talking too much. People leak when they feel safe in their language. My work is to keep them feeling safe long enough for us to live. They spoke fast German braided with a southern cadence, vowels warm as a tavern. A young voice kept saying, "Bealt you hurry up." Another mocked him. A third cleared his throat before every order. I mapped them by sound smoker joker boss and fed what mattered into my captain's ear in clean English. We needed the gate to open for a vehicle that did not exist and close behind it before anyone counted. The plan on paper was clever enough to fail. The plan in my mouth was simple. I thumbed my push-to-talk and borrowed a voice. Posten 2 an 1, I said post 2 to 1, keeping the vowels soft local. Zoll aus München macht eine spontane Kontrolle. 5 Minuten, keine Diskussion. Customs from Munich wants a spot check. 5 minutes, no discussion. I salted it with impatience, glazed it with boredom. The smoker swore, the joker laughed. The boss waved the first truck forward. We moved like a rumor. Our truck R's slid in behind a scaffolding rig. Lights low plates that would not survive a second look. I walked at the guard with a clipboard and asked for paperwork I had invented. He offered it like a child handing over a drawing. I nodded with the rhythm of approval. The joker wanted to chat. He asked if Munich still overstaffed nights. I rolled my eyes, gave him a weary Naturlich, and complained about coffee. He exhaled trust in a laugh. Our driver passed through the gap I had cut with breath and consonants. When the guard looked down to find a stamp that did not exist, I handed him a number that rang a van 2 kilometers away, where an operator with a gift for grunts performed bureaucratic theater. We were almost clean when a second set of headlights floated toward us from the dark. A civilian sedan, wrong time, wrong road. The boss lifted a palm. I pivoted into a different uniform curiosity with a stripe of annoyance and barked Umleitung. Baustelle. Drehen Sie in. Detour, construction, turn around. The driver blinked, apologized, and backed away. The gate clanged. The guard thanked me for doing his job for him. I told him he could buy me coffee next time Munich forgot to staff nights. He never did. Back in the timberline, our captain stared at me as if I had moved the moon. "You didn't break a single rule," he said. "I moved the ones they believe in," I answered. He laughed like a man surprised to survive his own plan. Wheels up someone, a ranger with a scar, tossed me a call sign, like a coin. "Asira," he said. "The one who walks people through the dark and gets them out breathing." The name fit. I don't drag men to safety. I escort their fear across a narrow bridge and keep it from looking down. The paperwork wrote other names and ranks. The file that mattered held one word, Asira, and very little else. Only a small circle ever knew it belonged to me: commanders who treat a voice as a weapon. Operators who watched me seal a door with a syllable. To everyone else, I was a quiet woman who listened more than she spoke. That is fine. I have learned to live inside underestimation. It is quiet enough to hear danger coming. So when the chandelier brightened over the gala and a glass hovered at a SEAL commander's mouth, that old winter stepped forward. The timber line, the borrowed Munich call, the guard's clipboard, they returned like coordinates. I crossed the floor the same way I crossed that road in the dark. Not with noise, but with the exact words needed to move a man from one side of danger to the other. The morning after the gala, the house smelled like cinnamon and approval. My mother set a platter of sweet rolls when she wanted peace, not truth. My sister poured coffee for everyone except herself. Ethan took the head of the table without asking. Chairs move for people who believe they deserve them. In my family's math, success sounded like a confident male voice and a receipt with numbers. Ethan specialized in both. He unfolded a glossy folder and slid printouts across the table as if dealing a card game. Q3, he said, tapping a bar graph. On schedule. Under budget. Command is thrilled. My mother patted his sleeve and sighed. as if the house itself had passed inspection. He talked logistics the way some men talk miracles pallets, routing throughput readiness. He made efficiency feel like heroism. When he said we keep the warfighter fed and fueled, my uncle hummed, and someone laughed the thin little laugh that meant admiration and dismissal in one breath. "You still on languages?" Dahlia Ethan asked without looking up. "Or did they finally give you something hands-on?" He said hands-on, like a glove you throw away. The room waited for my answer so it could return to its favorite subject, him. "I'm still where I'm useful," I said. My sister's eyes flicked toward me, warning or apology I couldn't read. Ethan smiled the way a referee smiles at a foregone call. "Useful," he echoed, letting the word dangle until the table caught it and laughed again. I'd heard that laugh at holidays and toasts, every time my work didn't fit their idea of service. He turned another page. New award letter. Multi-year. We beat 6 competitors. He explained a routing optimization he didn't design and thanked a colonel who'd never met me. My mother asked no questions. She only refilled his cup and said she knew he would go far. I wondered how far counts if you never measure down. The meeting, because that's what it was, ended with a prayer bent toward Ethan's future. Plates cleared themselves. I carried mine to the sink and listened to the ribbon of laughter, practiced and polite, that always floated after one of his jokes that wasn't. Contempt sometimes smiles the widest. When the others drifted to the living room, Ethan lingered. "You should think about certifications," he said, as if we were colleagues and I'd requested mentoring. "Something tangible. People respect tangible." He meant a badge you can pin, not the kind of work that ends with a door opening quietly and a man walking out alive. "Tangible gets people fed," I said. "Invisible keeps them breathing." He chuckled thinner now. "Sure, but promotions don't read invisible." My sister returned with a plate no one wanted. Her eyes said, "Let it go." Letting go is a skill you practice until it feels like consent. Ethan clapped my shoulder with a brotherly flourish. "You'll land somewhere solid," he said. "Maybe a desk with a window." What I remember most is the chorus, that papery laugh, the motif our family scored under moments when it needed to keep me in scale. It was never cruel enough to confront. It was efficient. It made me smaller without anyone having to say they wanted me small. Later he raised his phone and showed renderings of a new warehouse, all angles and flags. The ants leaned in. "We'll shave 2 days off eastbound," he said. "The contractor owes me a favor." Another laugh. I recognized its cousin from the gala, multiplied by carpet and photographs. My father asked if I was dating. It was offered as kindness and received as inventory. Ethan covered the silence with a story about a general who remembered his name from a handshake. Everyone laughed again. I stood to refill water and let the kitchen's hush hold me up. On the counter, a printout listed unit counts and fuel projections. Numbers behaved. People didn't. I folded the paper and placed it under a flag magnet. "We're proud of you," my mother called to Ethan. He accepted the sentence. She turned to me and smiled. "And you keep being careful." "I will," I said. The laugh in the other room rose and fell like a familiar road. I knew its curves by heart. A stubborn part of me wanted to pull the wheel hard left. Instead, I rinsed a cup, set it to dry, and chose the older discipline: return to the table and save my breath for places words move more than air truly. Tonight, I did not want to go to the gala. That is the truth stripped of politeness. The invitation had arrived in the mail weeks earlier, embossed and gleaming in ornament disguised as duty. My first instinct was to set it aside, let it disappear under bills and circulars. Ceremonies had never been my element. I belonged to the unlit corners, the places where silence could travel without echo. A ballroom with chandeliers and staged applause was the opposite of where I functioned best. But my sister called the same night the envelope arrived. She was excited, her voice dancing across the line, as she told me how much this event meant to Ethan's career. "He's been talking about it for months," she said. "It would mean a lot if you came, for me." The way she emphasized the last words left me little room to decline. My loyalty has never been to the gala or the brass or even the uniform itself. My loyalty has always been to the people I love, even when they do not always understand the shape of my service. So I told her I would come. The week before the event, I pressed the dress she had chosen for me. It was simple, elegant, intentionally quiet. I studied it the way I studied terrain, searching for vulnerabilities. There is always a gap between the armor we wear and the world that judges us. I knew exactly where Ethan would aim his comments, how the laughter might swell around him. Part of me rehearsed silence as if it were a speech. Still another part of me whispered a warning I could not ignore. There are nights that look like decoration but hide machinery. Nights when a single glance can shift the axis of more than one life. I had felt that in other countries, in other languages, in places where the wrong vowel could cost breath. I felt it again as the gala drew near. The morning I sat at my kitchen table with black coffee and tried to picture the evening as nothing more than dinner chatter and predictable embarrassment. I told myself, "You are not going to shine, Dahlia. You are going to survive a few hours and slip back into your world." Yet under the repetition of that mantra came a quieter truth: I do not seek the light. But sometimes the light finds you, especially when you are trying hardest to avoid it. When I finally arrived at the hotel, the terrace lights spilled into the winter dusk, like a promise I never asked for. I walked through the entrance with steady breath, every step weighted with restraint. I was there for my sister, not for myself. That was the story I kept repeating as the music began and the glasses clinked. I didn't know then that the story would rewrite itself before the night was done. I watched the cuffs click like punctuation no one expected. Naval security moved with choreography, one officer on the general's right, one at his left, a third collecting the flute in a sealed pouch. The ballroom made a sound I've heard on flight lines, the breath everyone had been holding. Finally remembering how to leave. Probably a mistake, Ethan blurted. His voice tried for casual and landed on thin. He stepped toward the officer's palm-out salesman's smile, stitched to panic. "Commander Hale, I can vouch." He stopped when Hale looked at him. Not cruelly, not even long, just a flat second that reminded the room what rank means. Ethan's hand retracted, rubbing the back of his neck as if the gesture could erase his reach. I didn't speak. My work then and now is to listen. The quartet lowered their bows. A photographer who had hunted for flattering angles turned his lens to truth. The flash strobed and failed. In the corner, the server slid toward a service door, only to be intercepted by a petty officer. "Chain of custody," Hale said, and an agent repeated it, sealing, labeling, recording time. The general tested the cuffs like a man testing a story for leaks, his chin lifted. "This is absurd," the words sounded rehearsed. My sister remained standing halfway, hands on the chair back, eyes ricocheting between Ethan and me. She was searching for a script none of us had brought. "Probably a mistake," Ethan said again, softer, as though repetition could conjure an alternate timeline. He angled toward a camera, as if proximity to a lens could restore gravity. "Let's not blow this out of, sir," a security officer said, not looking at him. I watched details. The aide's shoes were polished to a mirror. In them I saw my own dress, warped into a question mark. A contractor murmured about liability. Rumor began drafting itself in open air. 1, the chandelier made rain out of light. 2, the room leaned toward Hale, without moving. 3, Ethan's smile separated from his face like a decal, no longer glued down. I did not move to comfort him. I did not move to hurt him. I let the moment reveal its shape. Innocent people rarely need a speech. Guilty people often insist on one. The general tried a final lever. "Call my office," he told the arresting officer and the admiral on duty. The officer wrote it down as if phone calls were weather worth noting, irrelevant to tide. The general's gaze slid to me and snagged. For a fraction, a question lived in his eyes. "Who are you to interrupt the story I'm in?" I gave him nothing back. "Names are for paperwork. Silence is for work." Hale stepped to the service door, spoke briefly to the petty officer, then returned with a nod I recognized from places without chandeliers. It meant 2 things. We have what we need, and we will not rush. He glanced at my sister, then at me, granting dignity by seeing us as more than the echo of a man's ambition. "Ladies and gentlemen," a protocol officer announced, "please remain calm and at your tables. We'll resume the program shortly." The request landed like confetti on wet shoes. Ethan edged to my side, voice low. "What did you do?" As if I had built the cuffs with syllables. I kept my hands flat on the linen. "I did my job," I said. "You should do yours." "My job," he repeated, dazed. His eyes skittered to his boss. "He's a good man. He mentored me." I almost told him what mentors sometimes do, show you where the trapdoor is by letting you fall through. I left the line unspoken for now, deliberately. The officers moved the general toward the terrace, slow enough to keep dignity intact, fast enough to keep him from reorganizing the room with rank. The ballroom parted in two currents, those who looked away and those who could not. I allowed myself one breath of the cold air that spilled from the open door, then let it go. The night had changed shape, and I would not miss its next sentence by talking during this one. I felt the temperature of the ballroom change the way a pilot feels crosswind, subtle, insistent, busy at the edges. Faces tilted toward me. Praise brushed one shoulder, suspicion tugged the other. I stayed seated, hands folded, listening to the weather. I did not rise. I adjusted my breathing again. A captain I'd met twice offered a tight nod. Nicely handled, he said, then ruined it. With who exactly do you work for? His date smiled with all her teeth. Behind them, two lieutenants whispered. Commander Hale knew her name. Not her name, something else. A call sign. The word moved like an unsent text from table to table. My sister made introductions that landed like question marks. This is my sister Dahlia. Eyes flicked. Is this the translator? Is this someone else entirely? An older colonel took my hand with a softness I didn't expect. You saved a man's life by speaking softly, he said. Strange how some people only trust a shout. He meant it kindly. I pocketed the line for later. Other eyes sharpened. A contractor chuckled into his glass. Every party has a surprise, he said. At the adjacent table, a woman in navy asked, Why did Commander speak German to you? I sipped water. Because I spoke German to him. Truth sits best when it's simple. Across the room, the quartet restarted with a piece too bright for the moment. I tracked murmurs as if they were radio traffic. She must be internal affairs. No counter-intel. Maybe she's just lucky. Luck does not whisper the right sentence at the right second. Training does, and attention. Ethan hovered in my peripheral like a storm that couldn't decide if it would break. The friends who had laughed at his joke now greeted me with the careful warmth reserved for volatile chemicals. That was quick thinking, one said. Or rehearsed spike. The compliment carried a hook, and I felt the barb graze. I let it pass through without lodging. A young sergeant slid by with a tray, lowered his voice. Ma'am, my sister's a nurse. She says most heroes never raise their voices. The tray moved on. Small kindness travels without uniform. Two women from my mother's church arrived with concern, wrapped as curiosity. Are you safe, dear? We didn't know all of this. By this they meant the space around me that had become both aisle and spotlight. I am, I said. Eat while it's hot. They laughed, relieved to be told what to do. The vertical spike arrived in a cluster of compliments that weren't. A contractor clapped my shoulder too familiarly. Ballsy, he said, then added, You people usually stay in the back. You people, as if quiet were a species. I shifted just enough that his hand lost a place to land. Another man asked if I had real field time, sketching quotes in the air. I have real time, I said, and left it there. At the edges, admiration gathered like candlelight. A junior officer with freckles said, Ma'am, my team will talk about this for months. A civilian spouse whispered. Thank you in the shy way. Civilians thank uniforms for things they cannot imagine. Suspicion kept pace beside it. Who are you? What else do you know? Why did he call you a Syra? I did not feed it. A secret starves or grows on what you offer. Commander Hale re-entered, briefly spoke to protocol. I could taste the room deciding whether it preferred scandal or safety. My role was neither. My role was to remain the same shape regardless. Ethan finally approached, towing two colleagues as witnesses. Tell them it's a misunderstanding, he said, voice low, trembling. Tell them you overreacted. The sentence landed like glass on tile. I turned to his colleagues, not to him. I told a man not to drink what would kill him. That is not overreaction. The colleagues looked away in the identical angle of people choosing their futures. What I felt beneath the attention was an old steady thing, duty, warming my palms the way tea warms winter hands. Admiration and doubt cooled to one temperature. I let the room look. I let it learn nothing it did not earn. I stepped away from the table under the pretense of finding cooler air. The terrace doors breathed winter into satin and brass. The ballroom's hum thinned into a line I could pluck. When you live by listening, you learn that truth hides near vents, ice buckets, and doors marked service. Past a hedge of orchids, the hallway narrowed toward the catering corridor. Voices skimmed the tile, close and careful. I knew one of them, the aide with the mirror-polished shoes. The other wore a contractor's confidence, the kind that treats uniforms like revolving doors. "This is only the surface. They don't know the rest," the contractor murmured. The aide answered with a smile you can hear. "Then we keep it that way." I stood on the seam where carpet met stone and let their syllables come to me. There are words that belong to logistics, the way salt belongs to the ocean bill of lading cold chain lot variants. They use them like prayer beads, sliding from one to the next, counting money instead of mercy. I heard override tags surge, orders eastbound compression, and a company name spoken like a nickname a family doesn't admit in public. "Timelines," the aide asked. "The window holds if the warehouse goes live," the contractor said. "If tonight spooks them, we pivot through the museum wing. Same dock, different paperwork. Museum wing, same dock, different paperwork." That is how theft dresses for a gala in euphemisms that pass for competence. I memorized the order as if it were digital museum wing, dock, paperwork. Footsteps approached from the banquet side, and I shifted behind the orchids, becoming another shape in the wallpaper. The contractor's cologne smelled like cedar that had tried on too many boardrooms. He adjusted his cufflink. The tiny engraved anchor flashed, then disappeared into the sleeve. "Navy." Or a gift meant to suggest it. I filed the question without trying to answer it yet. "We lost the general," the aide said, irritation sanded smooth. "That slows signatures." "It speeds deniability," the contractor replied. "Martyrs make tidy stories. Our story needs noise." I thought of the ballroom's laughter and how easily it had been recruited. Noise is a resource if you know how to spend it. "Who's your cover inside logistics?" the aide asked. "The kid who loves handshakes," the contractor said. "Eager. Thinks he's seen the map. He hasn't." The tile cooled beneath my heels. Eager. Handshakes. I kept my mind from racing toward the name that wanted to volunteer itself. Haste is the shortcut to wrong answers. I repeated the phrase the way you test a bridge before you cross the kid who loves handshakes. They moved closer to the service door. "If anything leaks," the aide said, "we give them a smaller scandal to swallow." "Ghost pallets," the contractor agreed. Everyone understands a rounding error. Ghost pallets. I pictured them shipments that exist in a spreadsheet, but never see a dock, the kind of absence that feeds a war built somewhere else. A string quartet note wavered in from the gala and fell like a leaf at my feet. I stepped back into the ballroom before they saw me carrying nothing in my hands and a full inventory in my head. At my table, my sister's smile was stitched with worry. "Where did you go?" she asked. "Nowhere far," I said, and took my seat. Ethan hovered, then retreated when he found no audience. Pages turned in the hall of my memory museum wing dock paperwork. Override tags, surge orders. The kid who loves handshakes. I placed them on a mental grid and drew a thin line between them. The line did not reach a name, not yet. Around us, the night attempted to resume its script. Compliments returned with their hooks tucked in. The chandelier pretended nothing had happened. But under the music, under the clatter of plates, I could still hear the sentence that tilted the floor. "This is only the surface. They don't know the rest." I knew enough to know I didn't know enough. That is when I become most dangerous, not when I'm certain, but when I'm listening for the next quiet thing that will finish the map. I did not connect the sounds in the kitchen with the glass on the tray until the ballroom fell silent. Memory rewinds when it's forced. The tape took me back 2 weeks to a night when rain stitched the windows and the dishwasher hummed like a low engine. I was drying a pan when Ethan wandered in on speakerphone. "Make sure the special bottle comes to me direct," he said, cheerful. "The one with the ribbon. No substitutions this time." A man laughed through static. "Relax. It's reserved. Same dose, same label. It'll look like it belongs." I didn't turn. I wiped a circle of water until my reflection appeared, and a little weathered conscience told me to mind my own business. Families survive on selected deafness. I practiced mine. Ethan opened the fridge, took milk he would not drink, stared into the cold as if it were a mirror, and said, "The gala is our moment. One clean impression and the door opens." He clicked off, then back on. "Confirmed delivery to my office, not the warehouse. I don't need chatter. Copy. Use the side entrance. You'll have your ribbon by Friday." I thought he was talking about donor gifts, the corporate sort decorated for cameras. I put the pan away and filed the phrase "special bottle" beside cufflinks and slogans. Later that week, he practiced toasts under his breath at the sink. To service, to discipline, to the quiet hands that make victory possible. I rinsed coffee cups and chose quiet, because quiet used to be enough. Another night I overheard the partner's voice, while Ethan folded napkins he would never use. 2 ribbons if the second guest confirms, the man said. Not necessary, Ethan replied. We keep it simple. 1 moment, 1 message. 1, not 2. That detail slid past me because I wanted my house to be a house and not a staging area. I wanted to believe centerpieces are just centerpieces. The dishwasher shuddered, the rain stopped, the ordinary resumed. Small things began to collect. A courier text asking for a signature after hours. Ethan's joke about velvet paperwork forms dressed up to distract eyes. A calendar entry titled, Tasting Color-Coded as Work. I read none of it as threat. Language is the safest place to hide danger. It disguises itself as scheduling. On the morning of the gala, I found an empty length of red satin ribbon in the trash, clipped on both ends as if it had been tested and discarded. I tied it around my wrist for a second, measuring its softness, then dropped it back into the bin. No object is guilty on its own. That is what I told myself. In the ballroom, when I saw the server's hesitation and the glint at the wrist, the ribbon came back to me like a held breath. Special bottle. Same dose. It'll look like it belongs. My mind set the phrases on a table like evidence. The shape assembled itself. The kitchen sounds were not domestic. They were logistics. I kept my face even and my voice low, because it is impossible to be heard when everyone is safe. You must be precise when you choose to interrupt their safety. Hale's eyes asked a question. Mine supplied the answer we did not have time to explain. Sometimes you do not notice the bridge you are building until someone is already walking on it. 2 weeks of phrases, a strip of ribbon, a courier's insistence together. They made a span strong enough to carry a warning across a crowded room. I wish I could say I regret not pulling the thread sooner. The truer thing is this: I regret all the times I made excuses for the threads. After the arrest, I stood by the terrace doors and replayed the kitchen like an interrogation. The rain, the dishwasher, the borrowed authority in Ethan's voice. How easily normal noise shelters a plan. Families are excellent hiding places. So are jokes. So are toasts. The pattern at last stood clear ahead of me. I turned from the glass, returned to my table, and watched the present join the past, like 2 halves of a map at last aligned. They moved me to a side room off the ballroom, where the carpet swallowed sound, and the walls smelled like lemon and ink. A naval security officer took my statement, while a protocol aide set water on a coaster, as if hospitality could steady a night. Commander Hale came in once, touched the chair back, and left with a nod that meant, keep it clinical, keep it fast tonight. Across the hall, behind a door propped by a shoe, I heard the cadence of an interview. It wasn't shouting. Real interrogations rarely are. Questions arrived like calibrated weights. Name, position, authority, then slid toward money and movement contracts, surge orders, vendor lists. I caught museum wing and knew the thread I tugged belonged to a larger weave. An NCIS agent entered with a folder banded in red. Miss Monroe, she said, you warned Commander Hale in German and witnessed contacts between the detained general, his aide, and catering staff. Anything beyond your written statement terminology, I said. Override tags, ghost pallets, eastbound compression, a cover route through a museum loading dock. She flipped a page. We have some of that. Ghost pallets appears in his emails. His Lieutenant General Markley, she said. Logistics, a beat, and several assistants. Assistants chilled my throat. Handshakes, I thought. Eager. Does not see the map. Hale returned with 2 men in suits, whose shoes didn't squeak. They laid photographs and printouts across the table like a quick storm. I recognized the architecture of a procurement scam, the way a medic recognizes shock numbers that add perfectly while reality bleeds elsewhere. This pattern, one suit said, tapping a spreadsheet shows contract awards, steered to 3 shell vendors. They circulate invoices to mimic competition. Markley signs justifications, citing readiness. And the data, Hale asked. The suit turned a page. Shipment schedules, forward rosters, cold chain vulnerabilities. Not stamped classified, but critical by function. Sold in slices so no single sale looks like treason. NCIS slid a thin list toward me. We're compiling the aides. Any names mean anything to you. Second from the top felt familiar, tasting like fatigue. Ethan Cross. Assistant Liaison, Temporary Detail Procurement Support. Somewhere in the ballroom, a violin tried again. "Ms. Monroe," the agent prompted. "I know one," I said, weather flat. "He's family." Hale's jaw did not move. Only his eyes did tightening thread without touching cloth. "We'll handle the conflict cleanly," he said. "You don't interrogate him. You don't brief him. You tell the truth you witnessed." I nodded. Truth is an instrument. It plays one note at a time. The agent continued. "We have Markley on procurement manipulation staff emails about ghost pallets payments from a contractor listed on his calendar as a museum donor. We expect the contractor to flip." "Does the contractor mention a special bottle?" I asked. She looked up. "He mentions an impression, one clean impression, and the door opens." "Why, no reason," I said, filing the confirmation beside the ribbon I threw away. Instinct wanted to sprint to accusation. Training told it to walk. They briefed me on procedure toxicology on the flute chain of custody signatures sealed evidence lockers. At the threshold, Hale paused. "Asira," he said plainly. "Not for effect, your lane is observation. Let us carry the rest." Back in the corridor, I passed the door where Markley sat between two agents, hands folded as if in prayer. He narrated an innocent evening, a gala, a misunderstanding. People in love with their story reuse adjectives. When routine arrived the third time, an agent drew a mark without looking. Ethan waited near a floral wall used for photos. He had lost the architecture of his grin. "Tell them it isn't what it looks like," he said. "What does it look like to you?" I asked. "Politics," he said. "A rival. They hate success." "Success doesn't need a museum-loading dock," I answered. "It uses the front door." The NCIS agent approached and addressed him by rank and full name. She asked if he would come answer questions as a courtesy. He brightened at courtesy, then dimmed when she read him his rights anyway. As they led him past, he searched my face for explanation, permission, absolution. Families teach our eyes what to demand. I gave him none. This was bigger than his need to be liked, and smaller than the harm he had helped move. Because harm expands to fit the containers people build for it. In the side room, the folder closed with a flat sound. The night had its new shape: a general who sold slices of the map, a contractor who dressed theft as philanthropy, and an assistant whose handshakes had finally found a grip. The twist wasn't that Ethan could be cruel with words. The twist was that he belonged to the network those words protected. I watched the corridor empty by inches until I could hear the air return to itself. I stayed in the side room with the water glass and the thin folder, watching the condensation slide, as if time were escaping through a seam. Across the hall, Ethan answered questions he called courtesies. I tried to picture my sister's face if I walked out there and said the word that would break her life cleanly in two complicit. Silence has weight. I learned that young, and then the army taught me to carry it without shaking. But there is more than one kind of silence. There is the hush that keeps someone breathing, and there is the hush that lets a harm keep its calendar. I stood between them like a bridge that could hold only one traveler. If I vouch for him, I thought, maybe the interview softens. Maybe the word aid means naive instead of knowing. Maybe the machine pauses long enough for him to invent a version where he was only following a line of arrows he didn't draw. If I do not, the machine continues, and the arrows point exactly where they have always pointed, toward the door people pretend not to see. I pictured my sister at our mother's table, smoothing a napkin that did not need smoothing. I pictured Thanksgivings with a polite empty chair. I pictured the small, stubborn grace of a family willing to pretend for another year. I also pictured pallets that exist only as numbers, a museum dock, where night stacks boxes that morning never counts a flute of champagne that becomes a headline because a drop found a mouth. One woman's marriage, another woman's son in a convoy that waits for fuel that never arrives. Those were not abstractions. They sat with me like witnesses. I thought of Ethan at the sink practicing toast to discipline. I thought of his laugh scraped thin over my name. Cruelty is one thing. Conspiracy is something else, colder patient. My training kept repeating a simple order evaluate effect. My blood added its own do not become what wounded you. Commander Hale's nod sat like a compass on the table. Observation is your lane, he'd said. Let us carry the rest. I wanted to hand him everything I was holding and go back to being no one in a dark corner the way I prefer. But no one had tugged the thread that led to the museum wing. I had with my own ears and the stubborn habit of hearing what rooms try to hide. I poured the untouched water into a plant and watched the soil darken. I whispered, testing the taste of the sentence, Ethan is involved. The air did not change. The plant did not wilt. Truth is not corrosive until you pour it on a lie someone is living inside. He had choices. That mattered. He chose handshakes over questions, shortcuts over maps, a ribbon over a warning. He chose a story where success was a door and didn't care that the door opened onto a drop. My sister did not choose that. Neither did the convoy waiting somewhere for what the spreadsheet promised. Silence also has weight. I set it down quietly, the way you set down a bag that has carried enough miles. I signed my addendum terms, overheard route, described names I would not guess at, because guessing is another kind of harm. When the agent asked if I understood that a family member might be implicated, I said yes because understanding is cheaper than pretending. In the glass, I saw my face arrange itself into the one I save for work, the face that lives between breath and decision. I did not feel heroic. I felt tired and very precise. I opened the door and stepped back into a corridor where the night had decided to be honest. Somewhere a violin found its key. I followed the note toward whatever the truth would cost and pay. When I reached the threshold of the interview room, I paused, counted 3 heartbeats, and remembered another rule. Mercy without accountability becomes permission. I knocked once, stepped in, and gave the map I had drawn one careful coordinate at a time. He asked to see me somewhere without chandeliers. We met in a service stairwell that smelled of metal and steam. The door clicked, cutting the gala to a hum. Hale set his hands on the rail, eyes steady, voice built for a foxhole. Asira, he said, I once owed you a life. Now you hold many more. It hit where resolve lives. I nodded and something stopped pretending this was about manners or even family. Sir, you know my lane. I observe, translate, open doors so others can move. And tonight you kept a door from opening, he said. Good. Keep listening. He outlined what the folder implied. The logistics general bent contracts toward hollow firms. Pallets were billed that never touched a dock. Delivery data was sliced and sold in pieces small enough to look like gossip. It's ugly because it's boring, he said. Bureaucratic treason usually is. Who's exposed by the slices units forward, he said. Cold chain meds, fuel windows, rotation schedules. Nothing stamped high classified, everything lethal combined. People will stand under empty rotors if we don't stop it cleanly. I pictured a helicopter circling a field, promised a delivery on paper, a medic counting ampoules that would never arrive. The museum wing, I said, and a dock that pretends to be charity. He half smiled. You heard that? I hear what tries to stay quiet, I said. It speaks my language. He studied me. You're running 2 clocks, he said. One for your sister, one for the people who won't know to thank you. Both matter, I said. But one can survive the truth. Your sister may hate the messenger for a while, he said. Hate me if that buys you room? Don't hate yourself. We serve the living first. I thought of Ethan practicing toasts in my kitchen, loving applause that never asks what it celebrates. He will call it politics, I said. Rivals, jealousy, misunderstanding. He'll say a lot, Hale said. We'll say less. Procedure talks for us. Your statement gives us the route. We'll lock the dock, freeze the foundation's accounts, and follow invoices until they confess. You don't confront him again. His future tense steadied me more than sympathy. You said you owed me a life. When Baltics, he said. Winter. A technician could have blacked out a brigade. Your voice put us in the room without alarms. He reached for the switch. Your word stopped his hand. The call sign crossed my desk that night. I didn't know the face until tonight. I remembered a radiator clanging metal in the air, the way a borrowed idiom turned a guard into a guide. I don't need the face, I said. I need the work to hold. It will, he said. Keep your center of gravity. He tapped the rail. Guilt is counterfeit weight. Let the right things be heavy. Then here, one more piece, I said. The contractor wore an anchor on his cuff. Navy adjacent or someone who wants to pass. He spoke about ghost pallets, like a man who's practiced the euphemism until it feels like policy. We'll run the guest list against vendors and donors, Hale said. If a sailor sold his soul, we'll find the receipt. The stairwell light flickered and steadied. Do we go public now or later? Later, he said. Cure the disease before displaying the X-ray. Panic is sabotage. They'll make a martyr out of the general. Maybe. Martyrs don't launder invoices. Numbers don't mourn. We'll make them testify. He straightened decisions already moving down a chain I didn't need to see. One more thing. You didn't come to be brave. No, I said. I came for my sister. And still, you were brave. Don't romanticize it. Don't run from it. Use it like a tool. The sentence seated itself like a round in a chamber, potential not noise. What do you need from me now? Restraint, he said. Your ear, your patience. If asked, you saved a man from a bad drink. If pride, say you listen professionally and privately. If anyone threatens your family, call me before you answer. Understood. He reached for the door, then paused. The call sign, he added softer. You kept it clean. Most people try to cash one in. You never did. It's not currency, I said. It's a key. I use it when someone's inside a burning room. Good, he said. Tonight the room is larger than your family. He held the door. You're not the only one in it. We stepped into the corridor. Light rushed our eyes. Somewhere a violin finally found the note it had been missing. I felt the old posture settle, the one that lets me walk through noise without swallowing it. I was still my sister's sister. I was also Asira, and the map had widened. I had seen Ethan wear many masks, arrogant host at family dinners, slick pretender when boasting about military contracts, even the careless drunk who let dangerous hints slip on late calls. But nothing prepared me for the version of Ethan who cornered me 2 days after Commander Hale's warning. He found me outside the chapel on base, the air still sharp with the smell of wax and polish. His eyes were red, his voice raw, as if he had run through rehearsals of desperation all night. You're going to kill her, he shouted, before I could speak. His voice cracked against the stone walls, and I glanced around wary of echoes. If you say a word, if you breathe this poison into her ears, you'll destroy my wife. Do you understand? You'll end her marriage. End her. You'll break her. It was strange he spoke, as though I were the executioner, as though the choices hadn't been his. I kept my stance, still hands folded, the way I had learned to absorb panic without feeding it. Ethan, I said evenly, I'm not the one who planted contracts with your name on them. I'm not the one who let greed dictate alliances. Those are your shadows. He clutched at his temples as if my words were blades. You think it's that simple? Do you even know what kind of trap I was in? Do you know the men who stood behind me? He stopped, voice falling into a hoarse whisper. You don't. You never had to wake up every morning knowing that one mistake could erase everything. You don't know what it's like to live with a gun to your family's head. For a moment I saw it, the trembling hands, the sweat, the quickness of his breath. A man afraid. A man shrinking under invisible weight. The motif echoed inside me. Silence carries weight. But now his words twisted. It was my silence protection, or was it complicity? He stepped closer, too close, his eyes wet. Dahlia, please. Don't tell her. Don't ruin her life. If she knows, it will end everything, our marriage, her stability, the home we built. Do you want to see your sister crumble? The unreliable narrator in him worked like poison. Part of me remembered the arrogance, the smug smirk, when he dismissed me at family gatherings. Yet now he trembled like a boy cornered by shadows bigger than himself. He pressed his palms together as if begging before a judge. I swear he choked. I didn't know how deep it went. I was just an assistant, a name on the roster. I didn't touch the money, I didn't write the orders. They told me to be there, so I was. Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I chose it? His voice broke into sobs that seemed almost too rehearsed. Yet the tears cut tracks down his cheeks with undeniable heat. For the first time I felt an unwelcome sting of pity. If he were truly ensnared, if he had been nothing more than a pawn, then exposing him would indeed devastate my sister. I pictured her face, the hope she carried, the fragile certainty that her marriage meant safety. To strip it from her would be to gut her world. But then memory pierced through pity, his laughter on the phone, careless words about a special bottle, and later his smug silence when Hale's men combed through contracts. He had known more than he confessed. His tears, his pleading, they were not proof of innocence. They were weapons of confusion. You've always underestimated me, I told him, steady, but quiet. You thought silence was my weakness. But silence can hold truth until the right moment. Don't ask me to bury it for you. He dropped to his knees, then clutching at my sleeve, his words tumbling out in fragments. Don't please if you love her, if you care for her, don't let her suffer because of me. Keep this secret, I'll fix it. I'll walk away from it. Just don't tell her. The unreliable narrator wove deeper, making even me doubt the edges of my resolve. Was he guilty or merely desperate? My mind spun between images. Ethan, the betrayer. Ethan, the victim. Ethan, the liar. Ethan, the doomed. I turned, pulling my sleeve free, heart pounding with the weight of silence once more. Behind me, his sobs echoed like chains dragging along stone. I knew the decision ahead would carve my sister's fate, my own conscience, and perhaps the security of others. Silence was heavy, but so was truth. And soon, one of them would break. They sat me behind one-way glass in interview 2, speakers low. I had to lean in. On the agent's table lay my small black USB, tagged, the cord curled like a question mark. I'd carried it for months. Now the reason glowed on a government laptop. Phase 1, the lead agent said. He opened a folder of emails. Subject lines stacked like marching orders. The sentences sounded responsible until you read the verbs. Approve without inspect. Reclassify, redirect, add ribbon. Ethan sat with his hands folded, a paper cup untouched at his elbow. His gaze pinged between screen and faces, searching for a soft place to land. These are out of context, he said. I forwarded what I was told to forward. Phase 2. Contracts. Shell vendors bloomed, same address, different names, signatures repeating, a nervous flourish. The agent traced a path with his pen. Awarded here, justified here, paid here. No pallets moved. Ethan breathed too fast. I'm an assistant. Assistants don't design systems. We print what we're handed. Phase 3. Audio. A call I had recorded from the kitchen, the rain loud. The contractor came first, amused, same dose, same label. One clean impression and the door opens. Then Ethan's steady professional deliver to my office. Side entrance, no chatter. He shut his eyes. The agent paused the track. Mr. Cross, did you receive the delivery described here? He tried to borrow calm and dropped it. It was a gift bottle, a sponsor thing. I never opened it. Who was the impression for? The agent asked. Ethan's mouth worked. You're twisting this. Phase 4. A second audio clip shorter. Ethan again lower. We keep it simple. One moment, one message. The contractor. Then the ribbon will do. My face faint in the glass did not move. Ethan reached for his oldest armor. You people don't understand office politics. I was protecting my team. If I said no, they'd bury me and my wife with me. You were not protecting your wife, I thought, and kept my lips still. You were protecting a ladder. The agent slid a final document across a memo template, pre-filled with language that makes fraud sound like readiness. Ethan read the first paragraph and stopped. The sound he made was small, like a hinge that never learned to open quietly. He turned then, as if he could see through the glass and find me. Dahlia, he said, not loudly. I didn't move. Observation is my lane. He began to beg, then pivoted to anger when it bought nothing. You're ruining a career. Do you know what I gave up? Do you know what I was promised? The agent let the swell hit the shore and recede. We're done with phases, he said. We're at facts. They asked him to initial the inventory list. His pen hovered like a man scanning a cliff for handholds. He signed anyway. When he set the pen down, something in his chest folded inward. He looked at the glass once more, at the outline of his own fear, looking back. His last defense was small and human. He swallowed, voice torn to thread. You are not useless. The words should have felt like vindication. They didn't. They landed like late mail, true and no longer useful. On my side of the glass, I pressed my palm to the cool surface and let it weigh what it weighed. Not triumph, not revenge, just gravity finding its level. The agent clicked, stop. Procedure gathered the papers into neat stacks. The way order likes to pretend it can rewind harm, they led Ethan to processing. As he passed the door to my room, he didn't look in. Perhaps he knew I was there. Perhaps he chose not to grant me witness. Either way, the map now lay in layers, words, numbers, voices, all pointing to a place he had already reached. I closed my hand around the empty air where the USB had been and felt lighter and lonelier at once. The staggered reveal had done its work. Noise finally stripped off its uniform and admitted what it served. Outside, the gala music resumed bright and wrong while my phone buzzed and a message waited. The message was from my sister arriving while the quartet tried to paste music over the damage. "Where are you?" "They're saying things about Ethan." I wrote back. "I'm outside the hotel. Come to the porte cochere." She came fast, coat half-buttoned, eyes wet. Her voice cracked as soon as she saw me. "Why him, Dahlia? Why my husband?" I wanted to tell her I hadn't chosen him. His choices had. Instead, I said I told a man not to drink something deadly. After that, everything else moved. "They're saying investigation charges," she said. "They're saying you knew and didn't warn me." "I warned the person in front of me," I answered. Then I told the truth when asked. I didn't know how deep Ethan stood until the files spoke. "You've always disliked him," she said, angered by grief. "Is this what you wanted, everyone staring at me like I invited a storm?" "I wanted a quiet dinner and for you to go home safe," I said. "I wanted a ribbon to be just a ribbon. You could have come to me first." "What would you have done?" I asked. "Love him into innocence, hide him from a docket with his name." She shook her head. "You think I'm naive. I think you're loyal," I said. "So am I. But loyalty without truth becomes permission." A car idled. A valet jogged past. We spoke lower and sharper. "I have to face our parents," she whispered. "They adore him. They adore you. They will ask me to pick a story that flatters us or a truth that ruins the table. Do you understand the cost?" "Yes," I said. I counted before I signed my addendum. "I'm paying it too." She hugged herself. "You lit a match in my house." "I smelled gas," I said. I couldn't pretend it was perfume. Her phone vibrated, and with it the chorus text group chats, a cousin deciding I'd made it public. Some called me brave. Others called me cruel. A neighbor sent prayer hands and gossip. "People think you humiliated him," she said. "He humiliated himself," I answered, and heard it land like a plate cracking. I softened my tone. "He made decisions that recruited tonight. I stopped one of them. The rest was already inbound." She stared into the driveway. "If I stay, I look complicit. If I leave, I look disloyal. Either way, I'm a headline glued to a man's decision." "You're not a headline," I said. "You can choose air that doesn't explode." She managed a humorless huff. "Choose a kinder metaphor. I don't have one yet." Silence sat between us. She stepped closer. I braced for impact and found restraint. She wiped her face. "Promise me you won't talk to the press." "I won't," I said. "I don't even like talking to chandeliers." That gave us half a smile. Then she cried again, quieter. "Was there any path that didn't break something?" "No," I said. The choice was what to break, our pride or someone else's safety. The gala doors opened. A couple emerged, startled by weather. My sister took a breath that sounded like a map being redrawn. "Take me home." On the drive, our phones pulsed. Family threads split at familiar seams. An aunt typed, "Honesty without discretion is cruelty." An uncle replied, "Discretion without honesty is cowardice." Mother asked if we needed coffee cake. Father sent a single dot, then another. At a red light, she whispered, "They'll ask if you hated him." I disliked what he became, I said. "Hate is lazy. Systems love lazy." "What do you call what you did?" "Maintenance," I said after a beat. Keeping oxygen moving to the right rooms. At her door, she turned, eyes swollen, voice steadying. "I don't forgive you," she said. "Not yet. But I'm glad the glass didn't touch his mouth." She meant the commander. She meant every narrow escape we won't read about. "I'll take not yet," I said. "It's larger than never." She nodded. "Come in or go. Either way, tomorrow we tell the truth to people who prefer stories." "I'll be there," I said. She went inside to the work of answering gentle questions. I stood on the porch and let the neighborhood stillness argue with the noise on my phone. Somewhere comments tallied votes. Was I righteous or ruthless? Maybe both, depending on where you stand when the match is struck. I put the phone face down and chose again the heavier silence. The house was quieter after the storm of shouting and tears, but silence did not mean peace. It was the kind of silence that rang in the walls, a silence holding everything broken, yet refusing to settle. My sister had retreated to her room, the sound of her muffled sobs still haunting the hallway. Ethan had been escorted away, his protest trailing like smoke that refused to vanish. But in the aftermath, in that stillness, a smaller voice pierced through with a clarity that no accusation or contract could ever match. Why was Uncle Ethan crying when they took him? The words belonged to my niece, 7 years old, hair tangled from pulling at it. While she watched everything unravel, she stood in the doorway, her eyes wide and brimming with a confusion that felt heavier than any courtroom gavel or intelligence briefing. I bent down, motioning her closer. She hesitated, then ran into my arms, pressing her small face against my shoulder. Her innocence made my throat tighten more than Ethan's betrayal had. I stroked her back and whispered, because sometimes adults make choices that hurt others. And when the truth finally catches them, it hurts them too. She pulled away, frowning, as if trying to piece together a puzzle too jagged for her hands. But he said he was the strong one. He always said he was better than everyone else. I met her eyes, steady but soft. That's why he cried. He forgot something important. Being strong isn't about showing off or shouting louder. It's about telling the truth, even when it's hard. Her brow furrowed deeper. So, was he lying the whole time? The question landed heavier than anything Hale or the task force could have asked me. It was the kind of question that stripped away the politics, the military jargon, the encrypted files. It was the raw question of a child trying to understand why the adults she trusted had shattered the frame of her family. I exhaled slowly. He wasn't lying all the time. But sometimes, when people are afraid of being small, they create big stories. They cover their fears with bragging. They hide their mistakes under pride. And when those stories fall apart, it hurts. She looked at me for a long time. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Will Mommy still love him?" Tears burned behind my eyes, but I held them back. Love doesn't disappear even when people make terrible mistakes. Your mom will always carry love for him. But love also changes when trust is broken. Sometimes it becomes heavy, sometimes it becomes distant. The child buried her face into my chest again. Her small arms clung to me, and I felt the weight of responsibility pressing into my ribs. I could dismantle corrupt networks, trace offshore accounts, and expose collusion hidden behind encrypted layers. But explaining betrayal to a child, that was a battlefield of another kind. I kissed the top of her head. "Do you know what matters most?" She shook her head. "The truth. Because without truth, even love gets lost. Your uncle forgot that. He thought people would always believe the picture he painted. But the truth has its own way of walking into the room, no matter how hard someone tries to lock the door." Her voice trembled. "Is that why they took him away?" "Yes," I answered softly. "Not because he was weak, not because he was hated, but because he forgot that truth is stronger than pride. That's why he cried." We sat together in silence, her breathing slowing against me. I realized in that moment that revenge had never been my real pursuit. It was clarity. Justice was not only about punishing Ethan, it was about ensuring this child and others like her could grow up knowing that lies do not stand forever. Her small fingers clutched mine as if holding on to the one solid thing left in the rubble. And in that quiet, I promised her, not out loud, but deep in my chest, that I would never let the web of betrayal define her childhood. She deserved better than inherited wounds. She deserved the kind of truth Ethan had abandoned. When she finally drifted to sleep in my arms, I carried her to her room and tucked her beneath the blanket. I lingered by the doorway, watching her breathe. In her face, I saw both the past and the future, the cost of betrayal, and the reason I kept fighting. And though my body ached with exhaustion, I stood straighter because I knew the answer I had given her was not just for her. It was for me too, for Ethan, for my sister, for every scar that pride and deceit had carved into our family. The truth mattered more than the performance. That was the lesson. That was why Ethan had cried. The news didn't break, it seeped the way a stain finds dry fabric. By morning, the local feed ran a cautious headline: "Arrest at military gala. Investigation ongoing." Before lunch, national outlets replaced caution with appetite. My phone pulsed with links I didn't open. They wanted a villain. They wanted a heroine. They wanted a quote with teeth. I offered none. I made coffee and let the cup go cold, while the country auditioned my face for a role I never requested. Clips spread anyway. Someone recorded the moment I leaned toward Commander Hale. The audio was poor, but a caption did the work. Woman whispers in foreign language, Commander freezes, orders arrest. Foreign language, 2 words that split the comments in half. A veteran wrote, "That's operational discipline." Another replied, "If she's American, why not speak American?" as if English were a flag instead of a tool. An opinion host wondered if unaccountable intel people were running witch hunts. He paired my blurred profile with stock footage. The vertical spike arrived at noon, a short, context-free audio clip from somewhere inside the building. It captured only Ethan's line, "One moment, one message," without the contractor's reply. Under it, the caption read, "She staged a spectacle." The she was me. By the time a correction appeared, the clip had already delivered what the internet loves: suspicion shaped like certainty. My mother called to ask what a call sign was. I told her it was a nickname used where names aren't helpful. She whispered, "Is yours the one the commander said?" I said yes. She exhaled as though I'd confessed a secret hobby, then asked if I was eating. Mothers keep the country from dissolving. At the base, a spouses forum split into camps labeled "Gently Concerned." "Proud, please wait." Someone posted a still of me at the gala with the caption, "Right place, right time, right language." Someone else posted the angle of my whisper and wrote, "Wrong country, wrong tongue." A moderator locked the thread after 200 comments. Reporters caught me on the sidewalk. "Ms. Monroe, did you orchestrate the arrest? Did you coordinate with NCIS?" "Why German?" I answered the same way each time I saw something unsafe, and said so. "The rest belongs to the people whose job it is." A man shouted, "Are you the reason that General's career is over?" I said, "No, he is." I refused invitations that promised a sympathetic edit, and the ones that promised war. Commander Hale texted, "We'll speak with one voice, brief, procedural, grateful." I replied, "Understood." He added, "Your safety detail is available if needed." I typed, "I'm fine." He sent back a single period, which meant no arguments. By evening, an op-ed made the rounds, "The Dishwasher Mata Hari." It accused me of collapsing a good man's reputation with theater. I read the title, "Not the Body." Another piece, quieter, traced procurement fraud through old audits, and arrived 90% of the way at the museum wing without ever meeting me. That one I read twice. My sister texted a photo of a pie, cooling on the counter with the caption, "Choosing something ordinary." I sent back a heart and sat on my porch, while the sun flattened into copper. Across the street, the neighbor who always waved didn't. A kid chalked a hopscotch path and added an extra square called Truth. Late, a producer offered an exclusive to humanize me. I pictured the edit, my face softened, sentences trimmed to fit a frame built before I arrived. I wrote back, "No thank you," and deleted the note before the cursor could doubt me. I don't fear being misunderstood. I fear the harm that thrives while we argue about optics. So I went to bed with my phone face down and my door latched, and I let the storm keep its volume without borrowing mine. Somewhere online, I was a patriot. Somewhere else, I was a traitor with good diction. In my own house, I was a woman who tells the truth when it's time and keeps quiet when it protects the work. Sleep came thin, but it came. Dreams stayed behind glass. Morning would come with more takes, fewer facts. The investigation would continue in rooms with no cameras and clocks that ticked the way clocks do when they aren't watched. Between those two worlds, noise and labor, I found my footing again, exactly where it has always been, in the narrow corridor, where you can hear both and choose which one deserves your breath. They came at dawn, not for drama, but because logistics prefers morning. Vans eased into the cul-de-sac radios, low engines idling like held breath. I watched from my sister's porch in a jacket over sleep-clothes, coffee cooling in my palm. The warrant team moved with the quiet, I trust footfalls, arranged voices paired to verbs. Knock, identify, enter. Elsewhere, doors opened in the same rhythm. The dull network that had hid inside paperwork shuffled out in cuffs. Ethan's door cracked before the second knock. He had been awake. News travels underground before it breaks the surface. Without his performance, he looked smaller, no tie, no grin, just a man blinking at procedure. My sister stood behind him with her robe tied too tight. She squeezed my hand once and let go, deciding in one breath who she would be today. Lieutenant Cross, the lead agent, said, "Neutral as a metronome, you are under arrest for conspiracy to defraud the United States, wire fraud, and aiding the unlawful transfer of controlled data." Rights followed, memorized. Ethan nodded at the wrong times, searching for footholds on a wall that had none. "This is a misunderstanding," he tried. The words sounded tired, like a slogan past its season. He reached for my sister's arm. She stepped back, small visible boundary. They let him dress. When he returned, he had rebuilt a sliver of posture, but the rails were gone. He saw me on the steps. Anger flashed, then confusion. Then a plain recognition that the world would not return to its old features. "We don't have to do this here," he told the agent. "We're doing it here," she said. "And in 6 other zip codes. Sir, face me." They cuffed him in front, more logistics than mercy. He glanced at my sister. "I'll fix it," he whispered. "You can fix some things," she said. "Not the ones you broke on purpose." They started toward the curb. Neighbors paused mid-sprinkler, mid-dog leash, mid-school run. The morning held itself still, as if trying not to break the moment before it finished speaking. Ethan looked back once, not at the vans, but at me. "Dahlia," he said my name. "A ledger entry." He swallowed. "You are not useless. It should have warmed me. It didn't. It loosened something and tightened something else. Redemption is not a coupon. It is a sentence you live through." I nodded once. No smile. A small correction dropped into a longer math. They placed him in the van. The door shut like a book closed halfway through. The convoy pulled out. My phone buzzed headlines, hashtags the country auditioning outrage. Commander Hale texted one word. Proceeding, then a time for a joint briefing. I replied with a period, our grammar for yes. By noon, the Rings map lay on a screen in a quiet room. Shell companies nested inside others. Invoices cross-pollinated. The museum dock was locked and logged. "I just move what shows up," a forklift driver said. Everyone does until asked to describe the shape of the harm. I gave my statement one last time under oath, clause by clause. I declined media. I accepted a ride home and asked for the long way by the river. Water steadies me. It minds its lane. At the house, my sister sat at the table with a legal pad, boxing words, lawyer, rent, school. "They'll ask me to visit," she said. "I don't know what I'll do." "You'll choose what doesn't injure you," I said. "And what doesn't injure the future." She set down the pen. "He told you that line, didn't he?" "He did." "It's true," she said, not smiling. "You never were." I poured 2 glasses of water. We drank like athletes after a fight neither of us wanted, but both had trained for differently. Afternoon settled. Somewhere an opinion host rehearsed a monologue about whistleblowers and wives. Somewhere else a sergeant's kid got antibiotics on time because the system would no longer pay a ghost to deliver them. In the quiet, I allowed one kindness, imagining Ethan as a boy who learned to make noise so people wouldn't see he was afraid. Perhaps someone taught him applause was oxygen. Perhaps shortcuts looked like roads. None of that excused what he built. It only located the beginning of the map. That night I slept for the first time in days. When the dream came, it wasn't the arrest. It was a shut door. I waited until the person on the other side said the only word I needed. "Enough," he said. I turned the bolt and walked away. Morning would come again with paperwork and calls, with people choosing sides, with quieter rooms where facts outlived performances. I would keep listening and, when necessary, speaking exactly once so the living could keep breathing. The afternoon briefing took place in an auditorium that smelled like old pine and hot bulbs. Reporters crowded the center aisle. A screen behind the rostrum showed a map of seized accounts and shuttered docks. The museum wing sat inside a red box, no longer a rumor, just a rectangle of consequence. I stood in the side row, back to the wall, trying to be furniture. Commander Ryan Hale walked out with the public affairs officer and 2 agents. He looked like he always does before hard news calm. The microphone found his voice on the first try. "Good afternoon," he said. "This morning, federal agents executed coordinated warrants in connection with procurement fraud and the unlawful transfer of operational data. Multiple arrests were made. Critical vulnerabilities have been contained." He listed charges, dates, and agencies in a cadence that honored procedure. When he finished the facts, a reporter lifted a hand. "Commander, who warned you at the gala?" Another shouted, "Was she acting on orders?" A third asked about the German I had used, as if the language itself were suspicious. Hale did not look toward me. "A soldier observed an unsafe act and intervened," he said. "She followed her training. That is all. It could have ended there. He could have protected the work by leaving me a shadow." But the spokesman whispered, the room rustled. Questions sharpened. The narrative wanted a face. Hale's eyes moved along the side wall until they reached the place where I had become very still. He didn't invite me to the podium. He did something better. He squared to the room and chose a sentence to finish the guessing without feeding spectacle. Asira, he said. And the word carried the weight of a sealed file. You don't need the lights. You are the light. The room inhaled. Heat rose and passed through me like weather. He had not used my legal name, and he hadn't needed to. He recognized the work, not the outfit. A hand shot up. Commander is Asira, an alias. He shook his head. It's a call sign. Can you confirm her unit? Describe her contribution. You watched it, he said, and the room remembered the clip, a whisper, a glass, a pause that ended a plan. Another reporter pivoted to outrage. What about the general's reputation? Hale didn't blink. Reputation is not a security category. We protect people, not performances. The spike landed when a commentator tried to bait the room. Isn't it dangerous to let an intelligence person act without supervision in public? Hale let the question sit. Dangerous, he said, is watching and doing nothing. Someone clapped one pair, then a few more before the press officer raised a palm and rescued decorum. Hale closed with a quiet sentence, "We are grateful." He stepped away from the microphone and walked down the side aisle to where I waited. We didn't shake hands. He kept a half pace, speaking for me and no one else. You're going to get offers, he said. Tell them no, then tell them nothing. I nodded. The internet is already choosing my mask. He smiled without teeth. Masks are for parties. He looked at the exit, then back. You carried the heavy thing and didn't drop it. I exhaled. I almost did. He tipped his head. Almost is how you know you're human. Outside, the late sun washed the steps. A few junior sailors waited in the shade, unsure whether to approach. One finally stepped forward. Ma'am, he said, awkward and sincere for what it's worth. Thanks. I told him it was worth enough. I stood on the concrete and let the sentence settle into bone. I had never wanted lights. I wanted air to reach the right room, supplies to reach the right hands, and the truth to enter without knocking holes in the walls. Hearing the call sign out loud did not crown me. It clarified me. Recognition came from the only direction that mattered, from someone who knows the cost of speaking once and the heavier cost of silence. It would not make the next choice easier, but it would keep me from mistaking applause for oxygen ever again, in the future. When the noise of the day finally receded, I found myself back in my apartment, a space too small for the weight it often carried. I closed the door behind me and let the hush fall over everything. It was not the sharp silence of interrogation rooms or the fragile silence of waiting for a signal. This silence had no teeth. It was still steady, almost kind. I walked to the narrow closet where I kept uniforms, pressed boots lined like sentries, and one box I rarely opened. The brass insignia rested inside, faintly dulled by time, but still catching light in places. I touched the edge with my fingertip, and the cool metal felt unchanged, even if I wasn't. Once those bars had meant everything: rank, order, belonging. They told the world where I stood and what I could command. Now they were a reminder that recognition is temporary, but the work is permanent. I leaned against the frame and breathed out slow. For years my silences had been cages. When family dismissed me, when colleagues doubted me, when strangers mocked the quiet woman in the corner, I bit my tongue and absorbed it all. That silence was heavy, punishing. Tonight, standing alone with nothing but shadows and the faint smell of starch, I realized the quiet had changed shape. It was not imposed on me anymore. It belonged to me. I could hear my own breathing, calm, unhurried. No urgency to prove, no need to brace for insult. The commander's words still echoed somewhere in the background, but here they were not a banner or spotlight. They were simply an anchor. I didn't need lights because silence had become my light, soft, unblinking, unbreakable. I set the insignia back into its box and closed the lid gently, like tucking away a chapter rather than burying it. I wasn't discarding who I had been. I was acknowledging it without letting it dictate the next sentence. The room felt wider when I stepped back, as if the walls had leaned away in respect. At the window, the city lay quiet under its own constellation of street lamps. I rested my palm on the glass, not to reach out, but to remind myself I was still here, present, breathing, intact. I whispered nothing. No prayer, no vow. Just silence, and this time it didn't hurt. For the first time in years, I felt that silence could hold me without breaking me. It was not absence. It was presence without demand. It was the calm after carrying something heavy across a distance no one else saw. I smiled faintly, not for anyone watching, but for myself. I turned off the light and left the room in shadow. My footsteps on the hardwood sounded steady, sure. The silence followed not as a weight, but as a companion. Sentencing day arrived with the kind of weather that hides its opinion. Gray, undecided, a sky that would not commit to rain. I walked my sister up the courthouse steps without touching her arm. We learned over these months how to move together without dragging each other. Cameras crowded the railing. Microphones rose like reeds along a riverbank, bending toward our faces. My sister kept her gaze on the brass door and breathed in counts of 4. I matched her pace and said nothing. Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of paper and wool. Lawyers sorted documents by ritual. Reporters arranged laptops like shields. Ethan sat at the defense table in a suit that had learned to look smaller. He didn't search the gallery for us. He looked at the seal above the judge and pretended it could forgive him if he stared long enough. The prosecutor's file was thick, not to impress, but because theft written in numbers takes space. The judge entered, everyone rose, the familiar choreography unrolled. Impact statements were offered. A logistics officer spoke about cold chain glitches that on 3 occasions almost broke. A medic described waiting for pallets that existed only on screens. No one said the word poison. They didn't need to. The courtroom had already learned what a special bottle can mean. My sister had been invited to speak. She had written pages during sleepless weeks, crossing out anger, rewriting, pain, crossing that out too. When the clerk called her name, she stood, then shook her head and sat. Silence can be a statement more exact than speech. The judge nodded as if he understood the math of that decision. Ethan's attorney argued for leniency, with phrases that tried to make choices look like weather culture of pressure, confused loyalties, limited agency. The prosecutor answered with invoices, emails, and the steady gravity of systems harmed. The judge asked 2 questions that mattered and saved the rest for deliberation he had already done. I sat in the last row, hands folded, watching the practice of our rules do its work. The bench clock ticked in patient seconds. Somewhere behind me, a pen tapped and stopped. A woman squeezed my shoulder as she passed. I did not turn. I wanted to be furniture present without drawing light, exactly the shape of help that had become my habit. When the judge returned to the bench with his written order, the room changed temperature by the width of a breath. He read the counts and the statute numbers, then the total years that would not return to Ethan as gratitude or applause, but as time with walls. He spoke about trust as a national resource, about how betrayal of systems injures people who never meet the betrayer. He said Ethan's cooperation had come late and partial. He noted the line of assistants who had believed shortcuts were roads. Ethan stood. For a moment, he was the youngest version of himself, the boy in family photos, who learned that noise could keep you from being asked hard questions. Then the man returned, the one who had treated a ribbon like a password. He glanced back toward the gallery and found only our silhouettes. My sister looked at the floor. I kept my eyes on the seal. The judge asked if the defendant had anything to say. Ethan swallowed and reached for a sentence that kept running ahead of his mouth. I never meant. He stopped, new at the weight of words that cannot be dressed. I'm sorry, he said, and in the thin quiet that followed the apology sounded like a beginning. He wished he had learned to make earlier. He was led away without spectacle. The cuffs clicked once, an instrument tuning. Cameras would write their own ending outside. Inside, the ritual closed itself. All rise, gavel coats, murmurs, feet finding aisles. I remained seated until the room thinned. When I stood, my legs felt the ache of many months of bracing. In the hallway, my sister's face had the calm of someone who had peered into the furnace and chosen not to throw herself in. A reporter stepped forward and asked if she had a message for wives. She shook her head and walked past. That was her message. The cameras tried to follow. She turned down the side stairs where light fell in thin, merciful stripes. On the courthouse steps, wind drifted under our coats. My sister paused, then kept moving, choosing the direction without microphones. We reached the sidewalk and found a small space between 2 news vans where breathing was not a public act. She leaned against a tree and closed her eyes. I thought I might hate you today, she said, without drama. I don't. You don't have to love me, I answered. I don't know what I feel, she said. But I know who built this ending, and it wasn't you. We walked to her car. She gripped the wheel and said almost to herself, silence is different now. I knew what she meant. Not a cage, not an alibi. A room with a chair in it where a person can decide who to be next. I'm going home, she said. There are floors to sweep and forms to fill out, and a child to tell the truth to one more time. I'll follow in my car, I said. No, she answered gently. Meet me for dinner. I want to arrive alone. She smiled a tired, real smile. But I don't want to eat alone. I watched her drive away and then stood beneath the courthouse steps where pigeons studied everything without commentary. I could still hear the judge's cadence, the prosecutor's restraint, the sentences reduced to their bones. I thought about the first whisper at the gala, and the last whisper. I would keep a promise to myself to measure my voice by whether it carries oxygen, not fire. I walked to my car without looking back. The day had done what it could. The rest would belong to a quieter kind of repair meals, cooked doors, oiled laughter stitched back in small places. In the rear view, the courthouse receded into a simple building with columns. Justice had spoken like a bell that refuses to be a song, only a tone. We had heard it. Now we would learn how to live with the sound. I drove home on streets that had forgotten the courthouse, past coffee shops resetting chairs. My apartment met me with the smell of paper and soap. I set my keys in the bowl, turned on the lamp, and let the quiet take inventory. I didn't turn on the television. Noise had been the day's uniform. I was finished wearing it. I boiled water, rinsed a mug, waited for the kettle to sing. While it warmed, I opened the narrow closet where my uniforms hang and touched the sleeve of the jacket I no longer need to prove I earned. The brass still caught light on the edges. I closed the door and chose the table instead, a legal pad, a pen that writes like it means it, a journal. I wrote the date. Then the sentence that steadied me when the judge spoke, and my sister chose silence. Chien thang that su hong faila, hagukingoy kak. Malagyu cho min kong dan kemamin kam get. True victory is not bringing another down. It is refusing to become the kind of person you cannot bear to be. I poured tea and returned to the pad. I wrote about silence and how it changes form the way water becomes steam and then rain again. In my 20s, silence was a debt I paid to make rooms safe for other people. Tonight, silence was a room I owned, a place to sit without apology. My phone buzzed. Commander Hale debriefed tomorrow. Sleep. You did the heavy thing right. I thumbed back a period, our grammar for acknowledgement, and set the phone face down. Another buzz, my sister, a photo of our mother's pie, the caption dinner at 7, I sent back. Yes. A third buzz went unanswered. I listed what needs doing because lists are bridges between storms and the day after. Meet investigators for the last statement. Help my sister change the passwords only Ethan knew. Get my niece to soccer. Write to the medic whose shipment now arrives on time. Breathe, sleep, wake. Repeat until normal feels honest. I wrote about Ethan carefully, as if the ink might cut. I did not excuse him, and I did not reduce him to a cartoon. People build the ladders they climb and the traps they fall through. Sometimes they are the same structure. He had loved applause until it turned to dust in his mouth, and when he finally looked at me without his mask, he said the truest line he's ever given me. It will not redeem him. It does not have to redeem me. It only adjusts the record so a child can read it without choking. I drew a small box labeled "What Survives" and filled it with ordinary things. Corruption cannot counterfeit my niece's laugh. Dawn forgiving windows. A door that locks without sticking a kettle, finally quiet. I added one more line, the work itself, the discipline of saying the right sentence once, and then letting procedure carry it. I thought about the call sign, how it lived for years in rooms without windows. Tonight it stood in light for a breath and did not melt. I am not the name. I am the habit the name describes, escorting fear across a narrow bridge and refusing to let it look down. Asira is not a throne. It is a flashlight and a spare set of batteries. The kettle ticked as it cooled. I opened the window a little, letting the city's cold shoulder in. Somewhere below, someone laughed. I breathed not as a soldier or a witness, but as a woman remembering how to settle. I wrote a paragraph for the future me, who will question whether tonight mattered. You didn't win because he lost. You won because you stayed exact when it was easier to be loud. You kept oxygen moving to the right rooms. You told a child the truth without breaking her. You let your sister walk out of court under her own power. You answered the questions you owed, and none you didn't. When the page was full, I signed my name, Dahlia Monroe, then smaller the other one, Asira. I slid the journal beneath the radio where I keep small necessary things, spare keys, a multi-tool, a card with 2 numbers that open doors I rarely use. I washed the mug, dried it, turned off the lamp, and stood in the dark. The quiet no longer demanded proof. It did not suspect or accuse. It held. I watched the building across the alley go black, one room at a time. In the glass, I saw my reflection unadorned. I raised 2 fingers in a small salute to the woman who kept her lane, to the commander who trusted a whisper, to the child who now knows. Truth is a better blanket than pride. I lay down with the phone still face down. Sleep came like a friend who knows the spare code. If I dreamed, it was of doors closing softly and others opening onto ordinary kitchens where water boils and no one rehearses a speech. In the morning, I will drive to my sister's and eat reheated pie with a child who understands why some adults cry. I will say little and listen more. And when the kettle sings again, I will know it is time to write down what still deserves to be carried. I step to the window and let the city's glow settle on my face. My voice finds you from quiet after verdict. If it were you, would you keep silent to protect your family or speak up to protect the truth? I have asked myself that question in a dozen rooms, some with chandeliers, some with flickering exit signs. Silence saved lives in my world. Silence also hid the kind of pain that breeds more pain. Tonight I understand something simple and heavy. Silence is not the villain or the hero. It is a tool, and tools take the shape of the hands that wield them. I didn't speak to punish. I spoke to prevent. And still the cost found the people I love, especially my sister, who walked out of court with her dignity like a fragile cup. Some will say I did right. Others that I was ruthless. Maybe both are true from where you stand. What matters is what grows after a hard choice. In my family it is quieter now, but not empty. We are learning to speak without sharpening our tongues, to listen without drafting rebuttals. My niece still asks hard questions. I still answer them as gently as the truth allows. This is what I know: justice is not revenge, and mercy without accountability turns into permission for harm. So we try to hold both truth in one hand, tenderness in the other. Some days the balance tilts. We correct and we try again. If you feel the pull of loyalty, I recognize you. I love my sister. I do not love Ethan's choices. Holding both truths is the work and the path out of bitterness. Love doesn't require decorating lies. As for the language, I used the one the moment demanded. In a ballroom where attention itself could spill a drink, German gave us a small, precise corridor to safety. Words are oxygen lines. You route them where they will keep a body breathing. To those who think I should have stayed in shadow, I didn't chase light. It found me. Hale named what was true. I don't need a spotlight to do my job. The work glows when it keeps people alive. Here is my question again. Meant for you, not the headlines. Would you be silent to protect your home, or speak to protect the strangers who share your flag and street? What does loyalty require in your house? What does conscience ask when no one is clapping? Tell me in the comments. Tell one another. Not because the algorithm needs your words, but because we do. We learn by hearing how other hearts solve the same riddle from different angles. Before we say goodbye, consider one more image: a ribbon cut from a bottle meant to impress. It looked like celebration. It almost became a weapon. In your life, what looks like celebration but asks you to deny what you know? What special bottle have you been asked to deliver? If you're holding one now, may your hands find the strength to put it down. As for me, I'll keep the quiet work, observe, listen, speak once, and let procedure carry the weight. I'll sit with my sister and pour tea. I'll walk my niece to the field and clap for effort. I'll answer when a medic calls to say the pallets arrived on time. I'll keep the call sign in my pocket, a reminder that being useful isn't the same as being loud. Now I turn toward you. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, we hope you carry this story with you, and remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story. If you disagree with me, say so. If you agree, tell us why. If your answer lies somewhere in the middle, that's a story too. Was I right to speak? Was I wrong to act when family might shatter? Or do you believe as I do now that love and truth can live in the same house if we are patient with both? I stand at the window as the city brightens. Cars thread the avenues like careful stitches. In the glass I see a face I recognize, no spotlight, no mask, only a woman at peace with the cost she chose to pay. The lights below look like scattered metals. For once I don't need to wear any. Good night or good morning wherever this finds you. May your silences be chosen, your words exact, and your courage gentle. When you must decide between protecting comfort and protecting truth, may you have the wisdom to choose what makes tomorrow kinder for the people who will live in it. I am Dahlia Monroe. Some people call me Asira. I am still listening.